Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Carter DeLoro. I'm from New York City. I went to Pomona College for undergrad, and I worked in admissions at Pomona and Occidental. I've been a school-based counselor across New England and the Midwest, and I'm currently the co-director of college counseling at the Marymount School of New York.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
Hi, I'm Lisa, a clinical psychologist and a college counselor and a co-author of the book, The Calm College Method. I have one daughter who's graduated from college, one daughter who's about to go to college, and a son who's about to go to high school.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good afternoon, friends. It's Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday. Of course, some of you will hear this on Monday and some whenever you choose to listen to it, but it's always a very significant time for me on so many levels. For one, I do believe in the resurrection, so spiritually, it's of great meaning to me. But there's another reason why it's really significant. So in 1994, Anitra had a miscarriage. And then in 1995, at 38 weeks of pregnancy, all of a sudden, she didn't feel any movement anymore. And so we went in to get checked up, and I was so naive. I just thought, some routine thing going on here. All the other checkups were going great. I'll never forget the look on the nurse's face when she told us that the umbilical cord had got entangled around the neck and that Elijah had died. And so Anitra had to deliver a dead baby at 38 weeks. It was really hard. So those of you who have been listening for a while know last April, I spent some time at the Tombstone in Dallas when I was there. So she has said to me, I can't, I'll try one more time, but I can't do this again. I cannot do this again if the third time isn't the charm. Well, fortunately for us, so Anitra's birthday is April 8th, and Karis is born on April 6th. And Anitra walked out of the hospital in Philadelphia on her birthday, April 8th. And that was 1996, which means today for you, if you're listening on a Monday, tomorrow for me, because I'm recording this on a Sunday, Karis will be 30 years old. This was 1996, and now we're here in 2026. So we feel so blessed. I took Anitra to the airport this morning. She likes to do this. She flew into Raleigh to spend time with Karis and Joy, celebrate both of their birthdays together. Just got a one-way ticket. Karis will be driving back here on April 9th. So excited to celebrate my daughter's 30th birthday with her. This is a special time. So friends, I got a lot on this episode to get to. But before I do have 4 really quick announcements. So 2 of them have to do with questions for a listener. One of them is this. You do not need to share your name when you send a question in. We love it for those who are comfortable with their first name, but you don't have to do that. But if you don't share your name, could you at least either say the state you're in or even the region? I'm from the West Coast. It just adds a personal touch. Susan and I were notating how many of our questions from a listener lately, no name, no geographic location, nothing. If you could do that, we would appreciate it. It just adds a personal touch. The next thing is if you need an answer to your question, and if it's urgent, our SpeedPipe format's not the best format. Questions that are going to be best for us are ones that You don't have to have an answer within the next 30 days just because of the sequencing. Like I think right now we have 25 of them in the queue, and we're choosing to kind of do deep dives on them. So it's a little slower process. So if you need an answer right away, don't use SpeakPipe because it's frustrating. I'll go on, I'll hear this question. I'm like, I'm pulling my hair out because I can't answer it. And the person's like indicating, I kind of need to know by, whatever, like Monday, because that's the last day we can change our mind on course selection or something. So that's just one other tip. So I did get some bad news this week. Stylionis has been our webmaster for 8 years, and he's just incredible. And, he got word this week. Well, he's telling me something was going on. He was looking into it, but he didn't go into all of it. But the country that he lives in is not allowing him to work with a U.S.-based independent contractor anymore. So unfortunately, he tried every way, and I didn't want to take no for an answer. I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried this, I've tried that. Unfortunately, nothing worked. So why am I telling you guys this? There's going to be a delay on our website on loading up the interviews and all those things until I can find a replacement for him. Now, Joy loads the episodes up, and she knows how to do that. So you'll continue to see the episodes loaded up. But things like college spotlights and interviews, until I can get a replacement, those are on hold. Now, if you really want to hear an interview, the athletics interview's done, ready to go. The one you're going to hear today, Elise is doing, Jennifer Gershberg, that's edited and ready to go. If you really want to hear that and you don't want to wait a couple of weeks while I figure out who's going to take over for him, I can always email you the edited version. If you send me an email, just send us my personal email, mark@schoolmatch4u.com. Okay, friends, I've got a bunch of interviews coming up, and I'm going to start when I remember telling you some of the upcoming interviews for the purpose of this. If you send in a question through speakpipe.com/YCBK, there's a good chance that I will send that directly to the interviewee and have that interviewee take the question in our interview. So I'm interviewing Heath Einstein on Tuesday. He's the chief enrollment officer at TCU. He's actually one of our co-hosts. He's committed to come on here multiple times a year. We're looking at everything college resume. So I know I'm giving you no turnaround time on this, but if you're somebody who listens right away when the podcast lands in your feed and you have a question about resumes for college, send that in and I'll forward it over to Heath immediately and we'll get that answered on my Tuesday interview. All right, let's talk about today's episode. So we're continuing a series looking at how a student can stand out in a competitive admission process. What are some things you can do, some intangibles, and some things to be aware of? We started out going a little deeper into standard strong, but didn't want to just leave everybody discouraged. So we are trying to also share some things you can do, if you're standard strong, or just in general, some things you can do if you're aspiring to more competitive schools. A sizable portion of our listenership, that's important to them, and we don't want to neglect giving you guidance in that area. And then you're going to hear the final part of Lisa's interview with Jennifer Gershberg, and she's an expert on success in college, former professor at the University of Maryland. Now she helps students be successful in college. So she's got some really good practical tips of what you can do to be academically successful in college. I encourage you to share this with any student who's in college or who's about to go to college. All right, let's transition to part 3 of 5 on the conversation of what you can do to stand out in a competitive admission process.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Sometimes people don't realize how hard it is to get into a place like Claremont McKenna. Because it's so small and they're taking so many ED, and they're part of Harvey Mudd and Scripps when it comes to athletics. And I know from spending time there, I'm sure you know this, Carter, most of the athletes are coming from Claremont, not from Mudd or Scripps.
Yep.
So you take the combination of ED, small school, lots of athletes. That is such a small number.
Yeah.
Especially in regular admission.
Yeah.
And so it is important that people do their best to educate themselves on, am I even competitive at these schools? I mean, I literally, before we recorded this session, I did a session with a student. First time I did a session with this student, and great kid, all straight B's, you know, some low B's, some mid B's, some high B's. And the schools of interest, because the student likes big schools, are schools like the University of Florida and Wisconsin. Now, we know those are going to be out of state, by the way, out of state. You know, these are going, and by the way, business, competitive major.
So,
and I'm pointing this out because, of course, and God bless the parents who were there, because they were parents that said, you know what, I want it straight. And I appreciate you giving it straight. That's, of course, the student was discouraged. You know what I mean? Like, is there any hope for me? Because there's a tendency for people to start out like, I define success by if I get into one of these schools that are of interest to me. And I really want people to hear, like, none of the stuff that we're talking about here is going to make someone competitive if just the initial transcript, which is a combination of the grades and the rigor and the grade trends, are not competitive for those schools. Like, you can't strategize your way out of that. Like, the key in a case like that is to get excited about some other schools.
Yeah, unless you're a recruit.
Correct.
You would know that.
Correct. Yeah. And athletic recruit, different. I mean, 8-figure donor parent, maybe different. But for most cases, that's just not, you can't, sometimes you have to say to people, how badly you want it is not a criteria for you gaining. And I mean, and it's all nuanced, right? Because for some schools, interest is massive, but interest when you're in range versus interest when you're not in range. And
that's the point.
Yeah. And I can't say that enough, because I see too many people judging themselves as successes or failures when their expectations for where they want to get in, it's not their fault, right? This is not what they do like we do every day. They just don't realize how hard that is to attain. So it's on, I'm not trying to put a big cold bucket of, demoralization on people's zeal here, but there is a point where certain things are just not realistic. And there's that component here, right? And so we can talk about all these things that make kids pop and this, that, the other, but you have to at least be in range. And some of these schools, I kind of alluded it to with the Carnegie Mellon, like, once you take all of the different institutional priorities, and I know, Carter, you talked about recruited athletes, or, what Karen from Colorado College likes to call, I'm drawing a blank on the name. I have to edit this out. Compositional diversity. I like that term. Yeah, I like that term, compositional diversity, because it really can encompass so many things, right? It can encompass the institutional priority for more women in engineering, or more guys in elementary education. And then it can be the rural
more guys, period.
certain countries, more rural students, first gen, like, it's sort of all of that stuff can gobble up a lot of spots, as can recruited athletes, but so can other things. Like, some schools might have a priority for faculty, staff, and administrative kids, right? Or certainly, like you said, certainly there can be undersubscribed majors.
These are all the buckets you hear.
Yeah, all the buckets, alumni, and especially active alumni, contributing alumni. Like, there's a lot. The majority of the spots at highly selective schools do go to hooked or applicants who have an institutional priority. They do.
Right.
So now we're down to a small sliver. And then at some of these very competitive schools, 50 to 60% of kids, in some cases even higher, go to early decision. So if you're in the regular pool, like we're talking about very, very, very few spots. And some component of this has to be people having a realistic picture of this, because if you don't have a realistic picture, you're almost inevitably setting yourself up to be disappointed with the results.
And I like what you said about competitive to compelling, right? Because what you're saying is you first have to be competitive. And all of the things that we're talking about are, once you're competitive, once you have identified these schools where you are in a range that is possibly admissible, then what do you do to kind of stand out? And so that I hope that caveat is getting across to folks for sure. And the thing you're saying about the passion project, it is definitely also it frustrates me as well. And I think where it frustrates me about the term is that it does make it into, are you doing this just for college? Like I don't mind if someone does something and in a way part of their calculus is, well, this is going to help out for my college admissions, but you can tell in the way that students talk about things in their application when it is really genuine, when they are trying to make a difference. And that's what I mean. I don't think that that's something that's inherent to a kid. I think that that's something that they can access and learn how to tap into, but it has to be motivated by a real genuine desire. Because one of the things that I tell kids is you could do all of these things. You could take AP Calc BC instead of Calc AB, but that's not going to guarantee that any of these decisions come in the way that you want. You could do this initiative to integrate the cafeteria, and it might not lead to any different college admissions decisions. Are you still going to be happy that you did it?
Of course.
If that's the case, if it's a good thing either way, and it happens to increase your odds of admission, let's go for it. Let's see what happens. But having that internal calibration, Mark, like you're talking about, of being okay with the idea that it still might not be enough because there's so few spots and it can be so random, I think is a really important thing for everybody to wrap their arms around.
Absolutely. Well, so what can these kids do? Let's think for a minute about some very specific takeaways for these kids. If they're going to accomplish what you just described, Mark and Carter, beautifully, the first thing they need to do is get on the college's website of the college that they're enamored with and read the history, the mission and value statement, and the strategic plan. Because the college is not keeping it a secret. The values that have underpinned their academic program and community life, they're not keeping it a secret. They're going to tell you how it developed. They're going to tell you what it means right here and now. They're going to be crystal clear about the values that are guiding the way they deliver their academic program and the way they construct campus life. And then they're going to give you the future in the strategic plan. Who are they becoming? i.e., what kinds of kids do they want more of? Right? Let's connect the dots there. Let's connect these dots. This is transparent information for families looking at colleges. So the student reads that. If that arc of information and insight doesn't resonate with the student, they're looking at the wrong college.
Yep.
Right. They're not, this is why when kids say to me they want to apply to Brown and Columbia, I look at them and say, well, let's talk a little bit about what you're looking for. Why do those blah, blah, blah? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Core curriculum, open curriculum, completely different campus life and relationships with their local communities. Anyway, so that's one way to talk about the list. But then we say, okay, what evidence are you going to provide in your application? Remember, this is representational. What evidence are you going to provide that you get it? And that can't just be in the, why Bucknell question or, why New York City for NYU or Columbia, or, when the college is trying to see, do you get it? Right. So there's a very concrete exercise for kids, because then as they read those 3 sections of the website, which are relatively short, strategic plan can be a little bit longer, but interesting, they can make notes about how is the college choosing to describe itself. And I think that way of saying it to teenagers helps them understand that. It's like, so write down, make a list of the adjectives they're using to describe themselves, past, present, and future. And when they look at your application, you better believe they're going to be looking for that. They may call it alignment. Colleges may call it resonating with our values, but fit goes both ways, right, Mark? We talk about fit all the time. Fit is the kid saying, is the college going to meet my needs and let me have the kind of experience that I want to have? When I looked at colleges, my number one dimension of fit was not in New York City. And the second was horses. Let's just go for it. I want to be happy. While I'm working hard, figuring out what I want to study and do with my life, I want to have, that's my happiness factor. Yeah. And I'm so glad I had that clarity. It was a lot less complicated in those days. But so fit goes that way, but then fit goes the other way too, where the college says kids who get it are likely to thrive. They're going to be able to balance the challenge with the satisfaction, and they are likely to be successful. They're not likely to leave before they graduate, right? And they're likely to be great alumni. So colleges are admitting students who are likely to get the most out of their education and be happy, go on to be successful and be great alumni, right? And that can mean a lot of different things. So 2 dimensions of fit, it's a 2-way street. So that's one thing that the college, or the student can absolutely do.
Building off of that, because I think that's such great advice, and I wrote down a lot of it. Like, how is the college describing itself? And to the other side of the fit equation that you're talking about, I had asked the student, how would you describe yourself? Right. I think that's what you're kind of getting at, is that there are students, there are adults even still, who don't know sort of what their values are, how they would describe the things that they're trying to accomplish. And so if you know what the college stands for, you have to also know what you stand for. And when you get those two, when you can clearly define those 2 things, then that fit piece becomes so much easier.
Right. And it's going to be easier for the college to see evidence.
Exactly.
And evidence has become a magic word. Okay. Evidence is what the colleges are looking for when they read your application to tell whether or not you're, first of all, telling the truth, and that it's not just quantitative, but it's qualitative. So, if you're applying to a Jesuit university, and you better be able to articulate service and social justice in a way that fits for you, not your lofty, save the world, which is lovely. But like Mark said, have you saved the whales? Or, do you aspire to save the whales, or have you already saved the whales? Saving the whales already is evidence. Now, I think there are very small but significant ways, like the example of my student, who integrated the lunchrooms. He didn't even know that was significant, because it was a mini step. It was a, tiny step toward a entire school district understanding the issue and where kids were coming from. So we need, again, to think about the difference between, resume and representation. But the evidence-based admission is become huge, and that you're going to hear colleges refer to that and not explain it. Right?
Let me add to that, Susan. So one of the things that can be a missed opportunity, and once again, we're talking about some of the most selective schools, is the recommendations. And the attended a great presentation at SAC last year on recommendations that Rollins College put on. It was quite good. And the refrain over and over and over again was, give me evidence. Give me evidence. Don't just give me adjectives. Give me anecdotes.
Right.
And I feel it's a real missed opportunity for rec writers to not share anecdotes that give evidence of the things that bring out the personal qualities and the interests that really make that student inspirational.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's and I'm trying to share some tangible, concrete things that people can do. And so one of the things, even in selecting a recommendation, your recommenders is someone that you could have a conversation with, where you could talk about, you're not asking them to say anything disingenuous, but you talk about some of the things you're hoping will pop in the application. I have a form I use, like 9 things that if I've demonstrated excellence in any of these areas, will you just tell the story? And the story can be very short. The story doesn't have to be 1 paragraph. It can be when we're taking a bus trip to the science center. Jackson is the student I wanted to sit beside on the bus because the way his mind works is just so fascinating to me. And when I got assigned to sit with Jackson, that is so powerful. And it's a missed opportunity when students don't use their rec writers a little more strategically than I feel that they do. And it's the thing that Susan said, because it was the refrain from Rollins over and over. When I see a recommendation,
Evidence.
Give me evidence. I want evidence. I don't just want, we could go on and on and on about all the missed opportunities and recommendations by talking about the student's GPA or things that they don't learn anything from that they already know.
Yes.
That's especially in private schools, but not only private, it can be selective publics as well. But those recommendations count a lot. You've got teacher, counselor, and maybe even another in there. The student needs to be inspirational, and they need to come across as someone who's likely to have a big impact on their campus and maybe for 60 years as an alumni.
Right.
And it's just really hard to do that just with adjectives, because what I always tell everybody, 1, people are smart enough to pick somebody who's favorably disposed toward them. And secondly, whoever you ask is trying to help you.
Right.
So what do colleges see on the other end? They see a constant string of these positive adjectives, and you just get lost in adjectives. But what do we always say about stories, right? They're personable, persuasive, interesting, memorable, and inspirational. They allow the school to see the student on their campus, visualize them on their campus, making a difference. And that's what creates that inspirational component. So
absolutely.
When you said evidence, I just had to chime in on the recs can be a place where there can be an opportunity sometimes strategically, who you pick, what conversation you have. It could be the exact same student, but either based on who they picked or didn't pick as a rec writer, or guidance they gave or didn't give.
That's very important.
Could lead to a completely different impact on the part of the reader. Because remember, you're generating an impression based on what's in the file. And so, try to give a couple tips on things that you can have a little control over, because there's so many things you don't have control over in this process. All right, friends, let's transition to the final part of Lisa's interview with Jennifer Gershberg.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in the final part of Lisa's interview with Jennifer Gershberg, Jennifer talks about impostor syndrome and how we all can struggle with it. And she gives students some tips on how to work through impostor syndrome. Lisa and Jennifer talk about how women uniquely wrestle with impostor syndrome. Jennifer gives some test-taking tips. Jennifer talks about why she created her course. Jennifer gives her advice for parents of college-bound kids, some concrete tips that can help all of us. And friends, at the very end, Lisa shares a coupon code if you want to access some of Jennifer's materials at a reduced price. Listen and enjoy.
It kind of leads us really into this whole imposter syndrome thing. I mean, imposter syndrome is so incredibly common And it's common in college, it's common beyond college. And so these are the things people run into, right? They feel uncomfortable in new situations. They worry they're not good enough. They're worried they don't belong. And so it's really about forcing yourself, like normalizing it, normalize the feeling, remind yourself if it's supposed to feel sort of weird or uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. It probably means it's the right thing to do. And that's what reflects the growth that's happening. So, the highest achieving people have imposter syndrome. It's not a reflection of your fitness for a job or to be in an environment. It just means you're still growing, which is the goal for all of us all the time.
Mhm. So what you're saying, this is interesting, that you are misinterpreting the fact that you always can learn more. You can always know more, and that you're always in the process of growing for being incompetent and therefore an imposter. Like the idea is you should be completely competent. You should know what you're doing. You imagine that everyone else knows what they're doing, right? And in comparison, inside you don't. And so you feel worse about yourself. But what you're saying is that's
Right?
just natural. That's how it is.
It's right. I mean, you can be really good at something, but when you're in a new situation, you feel imposter syndrome
Hmm.
because you're in a new situation. It doesn't reflect on your skills. Now, two things can be true at once, right?
Hmm.
Like we all still have to build our skills because I really do believe competence makes us more confident. I always say competence breeds confidence. And I do believe that. I think, as you build your skills, you're going to naturally get better at things and get more confident. But then you'll still go into a new setting and get imposter syndrome
Hmm.
because that's what we do. But you'll have the skills to back you up. You'll
Hmm.
know that you can rely on
Hmm.
yourself. And that's really what confidence is about.
Yeah, and I think for women, that is particularly an important thing to keep in mind, because I know
Yeah,
studies have shown that women tend to feel like they are imposters at a higher rate than men. But,
they do.
arguably just as or more competent than the guys. So,
They are. I mean, if you look at all the sort of metrics, women are outperforming men
mhm,
um, across the board, and so it's really not a reflection of competence. It's more just about self doubt and our own mental um, hurdles that we all face.
right. That's perfect and great to keep in mind. What about things like other areas where you might feel less confidence, like taking tests? Like for a lot of kids, taking tests is a very anxiety provoking situation. What sort of strategies do you have for that?
So, I mean, the number one strategy is to do a better job preparing.
Hmm.
It's like tough love time. We know when we have mastered the material and when we haven't. And when
Hmm.
students study as they normally do, which is passively, if your studying consists of like reviewing your notes and flipping through the book while your TikTok is going off in the background and your friends are coming up to you and distracting you and you're getting ready for social events that night, you're not learning anything. You're not mastering the material. And of course, you're going to feel nervous going into the test because you're not ready. When the studying has been more effective, when you have employed active study techniques, when you have taught the material to someone else, which is a great study tip, without notes, you've really mastered the material because you've got to master it in order to teach it in a way that makes sense to someone. You're going to go in feeling much more in control of the test. And of course, we all get the normal pre-test jitters. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. But really, students complain of crippling test anxiety and often blame poor performance on this. And it turns out that often they just simply haven't studied the right way or enough to have mastered the material. So that's number one. And then, of course, test anxiety is just another form of anxiety. So any other tools that people use to manage anxiety can help for test anxiety as well, be it meditation or exercise or getting enough sleep or therapy or medication, like whatever are the resources you would typically use to deal with anxiety can help for test anxiety as well. But for sure, if you haven't studied the right way and haven't really learned the material thoroughly, you're going to have more test anxiety.
Yeah. And I think that, obviously you have to assume that when you're anxious, you're not going to be able to perform at your best. So that's
Right.
where that over practicing, over learning comes in handy, because you know it so well that even when you're not like at 100%, you're maybe at 72%, you can still access that material and still, do well on the
Exactly.
test. Unfortunately, it takes
Yep.
time, right? It takes time to get prepared in that
It does.
to that extent. But I think that's so important. And again, once you take a test and everything's fine, and you keep taking tests and everything's fine, then tests are just going to be fine.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
and so then they'll just be part of your life that you don't really love, maybe make you a little anxious, but you kind of
Right. Like no one enjoys it, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's not a fun part of life, but it is a part of life, even post grad, depending on what career path you choose. Tests are part of life. So it's really important, to sort of build up the wins, because all of those will feed into your confidence.
Mhm. Yeah, as we're talking, I'm kind of struck just by the fact that, like a lot about learning is not fun. It's just not fun. It's
Yeah.
hard work. I mean, it can be valuable and it can be like mentally stimulating, but there's a certain amount of not funness. And I think that sometimes kids in these generations have been presented with the idea that learning is fun all the time. And
Well, I think yeah, absolutely. That it's fun and that it's exciting and that it's something they have to be passionate about. And, kids are now, because of social media and because of all this whole digital age, their attention spans have gone down to like negligible levels. And so they don't have a high tolerance for boredom
mhm,
or for ambiguity or for the things that unfortunately just accompany learning. They like do they want the grade and that's it, but you can't shortcut it. Like you really at the college level have to learn the material deeply to do well.
mhm.
And so that's where kids run into problems. And that's why I created the course. I wanted to really break it down and make everything actionable so they know, because they really don't know what to do.
Mhm.
Um, so I wanted to sort of break down the steps and make them very accessible to anyone for success.
Yeah. And I think that the course does such a great job of that. And it's not long. Everything is like
No,
in a bite size. You made it for the short attention span. Like a lot of
I did.
these sections are not longer than your average TikTok, I don't think. But
Well,
they have some very pithy information that you need to know in there.
I know my audience, but honestly, I think that's part of my legal training. I don't have any tolerance for fluff or BS, so I'm just very direct, and
Mhm.
I just sort of gave it to them. But I think it's really what they need to be successful. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah. So what, we have a lot of parents of college bound kids listening. What advice do you have for us?
Well, first, know that I am one of you. So I mentioned my my three kids before. Now I have my oldest is 20 and my twins are 17. So I am right there with you. And I want you to know that. There are definitely things parents can do to help their children launch to college successfully. So when your kids are still in high school, for sure, you want to help them with their organization and executive functioning. I know we talked before about how the environment is so different in high school and college, but you can still get them into sort of good habits in terms of maintaining a calendar and planning ahead and planning any long-term assignments, sort of what they're going to do when, because this will all serve their executive functioning, which is so important. I would say if you're not doing this already, have your kids do some work around the house because they're going to have to. I mean, really, they're going to have roommates. They're going to have, like, make sure they make their beds. It's just part of good functioning, I would say. I mean, I'll probably get some hate for that.
I know there's such a debate, really, but I make my bed every day.
There's a debate. You know, I'm okay. Like, I'm okay debating, but it's, it's part of being like a great roommate and part of keeping your space clean and organized, I think is really important for our brain space and for learning and to stay calm. Talk frequently about imposter syndrome and normalize it. I would say this is huge because we all care a lot about our kids developing confidence. And, authentic confidence, as I said before, really comes down to building your skills and knowing that you can rely on yourself. It's not really about having like social swagger or being cool. It's more about knowing you can depend on yourself to get through whatever challenge is next. So talk to your kids about this. Talk to them about your challenges and what you've done to overcome them. This is how we sort of help them build resilience and build a tolerance to challenge and understand that they're not going to show up at college and be the star of the show. They're going to start at the bottom and sort of like work to prove themselves and to prove to themselves that they can handle things. So I think it's important to normalize imposter syndrome, to normalize they're going to feel insecure, they're going to feel nervous. Everyone else feels the same way. You sometimes feel the same way. And this is how, you get through it. So to do that, I also recommend, because I mentioned earlier that students have a hard time with ambiguity. They really do. They've become sort of more black and white thinkers sometimes, and they look for like concrete answers to questions that often don't have concrete answers. So I would say if you have dinner as a family, which I hope you do at least sometimes, bring up topics that are nuanced. Bring up topics that are not black and white. And have your kids think about and articulate different points of view. I think that will really help prepare them for the critical thinking that is involved in college. And it will help them get ready for the exposure they'll have to so many different types of people and points of view. So I think that will be good preparation as well.
Yeah, I think all of that is great advice. And I know for those of us for Generation X, like we kind of suffer in silence. We don't talk about our struggles. And maybe, we just think that everyone does that, right? But maybe we need to do that and be more, say it out loud to our kids. Yeah, that's hard. Here's why it's hard. This is my struggle. Because they assume we don't do it. If we're not talking about it.
That's right. I mean, I think it's really important, as it's developmentally appropriate, to be very honest with our kids and to be open about our struggles and how we've overcome them, because it helps them normalize it. Just to know that we, their parents, are not like all knowing. We're not, but we're humans and humans struggle, and here's how we can be resourceful to figure things out.
Yeah. And I do think that the critical thinking piece is also really key. I mean, we've had other guests on the podcast who've written books about like how to start thinking critically because they noticed that their students were not thinking critically.
Yes.
And that is such a life skill that, really helps you in so many ways. And it kind of almost protects you from being taken advantage of in certain instances.
That's right.
But it doesn't necessarily come naturally. And so just trying to foster that however you can is really, I think, an excellent idea.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. I think critical thinking is so important, and it is a skill that we're not really seeing in college now. That we can work on even as parents.
Yeah. I know when I started at the University of Chicago a zillion years ago, I went to a high school that was fine, but there was no critical thinking.
that I ever did. So the first time they wanted me to write a paper on my analysis and what I thought about, a famous philosopher, I was like, well, nobody cares what Lisa thinks about this, right? Nobody cares. Why my opinion is not important here. Why should I have one? But I had to have one because the paper was due. So I, kind of struggled and learned that, but it was a shock to the system. And hopefully, if you're doing this at the dinner table, then it won't be like that for kids when they get there.
Yeah, I think it'll get them used to it. So it's funny. When I taught business ethics, I presented an ethical dilemma to my students, and there was truly no right answer. One could argue either side. And I asked each student to vote on what they thought the right thing was. And we had already reviewed all of the normative theories and stuff. So they had material to work with. And so the vote was sort of mixed, and I recorded it. And the assignment was to write a paper arguing the other point of view, the opposite of what they believed. And the students were totally overwhelmed. They're like, how are we supposed to write something we don't believe? I said, look, it's an academic exercise. This is critical thinking. This is putting yourself in the position of someone else and understanding a point of view, even if you don't personally subscribe to it. And it was fascinating. And the students actually, some of them changed their vote by the time the assignment was done. We took another vote and they loved it. And it was really hard for many of them, but they really appreciated the exercise because it forced them into that position. And, if parents are sort of helping their kids now understand different perspectives and points of view, even if they don't agree, that's okay. But, it goes such a long way in terms of critical thinking and, how to have good relationships with people, not being inside an echo chamber, with people who may disagree with you, and that's okay.
Yeah. So parents, you have our permission to go be that devil's advocate at the dinner table and pick fights with your teenager about important world events.
Don't blame me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. We could talk about critical thinking forever, but I think that you provide such a valuable service to families and students. So how can they find you? How can they learn more and get more of your advice?
Well, I have a website with more information. So that is www.jgtalks.org. And on there are links to my social media, to my course, to everything else. So I would say to start at the website because that's sort of a one-stop shop.
And if they are interested in getting the course, how do they do that? And I highly recommend it as having just taken it. It's really great.
Thank you. The course is linked on my website. So I would say to go there, and I can send you the link as well if you want to, if there's a way for you to post it as well. I'm happy to have you do that.
Yeah, we can certainly put it in the show notes. Do you ever go around the country and present to schools, or let's say somebody's a president of the PTA and they need a really great speaker? How would they go about that?
I do all of that. Yes, I love that. So I do a lot of parent PTA talks, and I can do those in person or Zoom. Those are typically done virtually just because that's how the PTAs or PAs operate, but I'm available for either. And yes, I travel throughout the country. I speak at high schools. I speak at colleges. All my talks are for groups, which is actually one reason I created the course, because that is available to individuals. And I was asked a lot about individual work. So I wanted to be accessible to individuals in that way as well. But any group can bring me in to talk. All my talks are related to student success in one way or another. But of course, I work with the group to determine their objective and what I can best speak to.
Yeah, no, that's great. You're like a one woman on a mission to make sure that America's youth are prepared for college, and you won't stop until every last one of them is ready to go.
I really, really try. And then, at colleges, I want to make sure they are successful in college and beyond. So a lot of those talks center more on professional development topics.
Yeah.
confident communication in the workplace and resume workshops and how to build your network and all of those things.
Mhm.
But for, for parents and high school students, it's really all about like showing up at college ready to succeed.
Mhm. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast, Jennifer. And I have to say for listeners, Jennifer is very generously offering us a discount on her course to listeners. And you can get that by just going to her website, clicking checkout and putting the code YCBK, all in lowercase, in the coupon code box. And I think you will get 10% off, which is great. So definitely check that out. And thank you so much. I feel like this is going to be so helpful to our listeners and their kids.
Well, I hope so. Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
On Thursday's episode, we're going to have a question from a listener. And I can't tell you what it is now, not because I'm trying to be coy. I've done that before where I've tried to be coy. I'm not beyond having a tease, I think it was Batman and Robin, if I remember, way back in the day when I was like a little kid with my brother. They would kind of end with these little teases to have you coming back for the next week. I have done that before. I'm not gonna say I haven't. But in this case, it's not that. So when a student sends in a question, it goes to the front of the line. And we had a student, Michael, send in a question, but I'm recording our answer to that with Hillary and Susan in about 22 hours. So sometimes you have a glitch when you record and it doesn't always work. As long as that recording goes smoothly, we will have a student question from Michael as our question from a listener on Thursday's episode. And then we will continue part 4 of 5 with Carter and Susan, the roundtable, on looking at what you can do to stand out in the competitive admission process. And then we do have a brand new college spotlight. And it is the State Technical College of Missouri, better known as State Tech, located in Lynn, Missouri. It's often been recognized as one of the top performing technical colleges in the United States. And they focus on very high demand, industry driven programs. It's been a really long time since we brought you a tech focused College Spotlight, and Lisa and Linda will be doing that for you. That's a one-parter. And friends, it's decision-making time. I mean, most of my sessions with seniors right now are either helping them figure out which of the schools they're admitted to attend, or taking people through a financial appeals process. Those are the two big things I'm doing right now with seniors. And decisions have to be made. National Candidate Reply Day, May 1st. 3.5 weeks out. And there's one thing I don't think gets enough emphasis when people are making a decision. Before I tell you what it is, I'll share a story with you. When I dropped Joy off at college, I called her over and I said, Joy, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. I also said, show me the 5 people you spend the most time with, and I'll show you exactly what you're going to look like. Now, neither one of those things were tidbits of sagacity that came from my mind. I borrow a lot of things out here, and both of those things I've heard from others, and I should be able to give attribution, but I don't know who penned those phrases. But it's actually true, and it's on my mind because a listener sent me a text last night, and they said, you're always saying, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. I think you would really like this. And they introduced me to someone who they thought, I might be interested in, maybe even having on the podcast. So that's kind of been on my mind lately. But it's also on my mind because when it comes to selecting a college, one thing I don't think gets enough attention is this simple question. Are these the students I want to be around for the next 4 years? Is this the faculty, staff, and administration I want to be around the next 4 years? In other words, are these my people? See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, Please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid.website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.